I Am Malala, Chapter 5. Why I don't wear earrings and passions don't say thank you. By the age of 7, I was used to being top of my class. I was the one who would help other people who had difficulties. Malala is a genuine girl, my class fellow would say. I was also known for participating in everything: badminton, drama, cricket, art, even singing, though I wasn't much good. So when a new girl named Malka Enur joined our class, I didn't think anything of it. Her name means Queen of Light, and she said she wanted to be Pakistani's first female army chief. Her mother was a teacher at a different school, which was unusual as none of our mothers were. To begin with, she didn't say much in class. The competition was always between me and my best friend Moniba, who had beautiful writing and presentation, which the examiners liked, but I knew I could bear her on content. I could beat her on content. So when we did the end of year exams and Malkanur came first, I was shocked. At home, I cried and cried and had to be confronted by my mother. Around that time, we moved away from where we had been living on the same street as Moniba to an area where I didn't have any friends. On our new road, there was a girl called Safina who was a bit younger than me. We started to play together. She was a pampered girl who had lots of dolls and shoebox full of jewelry, but she kept eyeing up the pink plastic pretend mobile phone my father had bought me, which was one of the only toys I had. My father was always talking on his mobile, so I loved to copy him and pretend to make calls on mine. One day it disappeared. A few days later, I saw Safina playing with a phone exactly the same as mine. Where did you get that? I asked. I bought it in the bazaar, she said. I realized now she could have been telling the truth, but then I thought, she is doing this to me and I will do the same to her. I used to go to her house to study, so whenever I was there, I would pocket her things, mostly toy jewelry like earrings and necklaces. It was easy. At first, stealing gave me a thrill, but that did not last long. Soon it became a compulsion. I did not know how to stop. One afternoon, I came home from school and rushed into the kitchen as usual for a snack. Hello, Bobby, I called. I'm starving. There was silence. My mother was sitting on the floor pounding spices, brightly colored turmeric, and cumin, filling the air with their aroma. Over and over she pounded. Her eyes would not meet mine. What had I done? I was very sad and went to my room. When I opened my cupboard, I saw all the things I had taken were gone. I had been caught. My cousin Rena came into my room. They knew you were stealing, she said. They were waiting for you to come clean, but you just kept on. I felt a terrible sinking feeling in my stomach. I walked back to my mother with my head bowed. What, it, what you did was wrong, Malala, she said. Are you trying to bring shame on us that we can't afford to buy such things? It's not true, I lied. I didn't take them, but she knew I had. Safina started, I protested. She took the pink phone that Abba bought me. My mother was unmoved. Safina is younger than you, and you should have taught her better, she said. You should have set an example. I started crying and apologized over and over again. Don't tell Abba, I begged. I couldn't bear for him to be disappointed in me. It's horrible to feel unworthy in eyes of your parents. It wasn't the first time. When I was little, I went to the bazaar with my mother and spotted a pile of almonds on a cart. They looked so tasty that I couldn't resist grabbing a handful. My mother told me off and apologized to the cart owner. He was furious and would not placate it. We still had little money, and my mother checked her purse to see what she had. Can you sell them for me for 10 rupees? She asked. No, he replied. Almonds are costly. My mother was very upset and told my father. He immediately went and bought the whole lot from the man and put them in a glass dish. Almonds are good, he said. If you eat them with milk just before bed, it makes you brainy. But I knew he didn't have much money, and the almonds in the dish were a reminder of my guilt. I promised myself I would never do such a thing, and now I had. My mother took me to say sorry to Safina and her parents. It was very hard. Safina said nothing about my phone, which didn't seem fair, but I didn't mention it either. Though I felt bad, I was so relieved it was over. Since that day, I had never lied or stolen. Not a single lie, not a single penny, not even the coins my father leaves around the house, which we are allowed to buy snacks with. I also stopped wearing jewelry because I asked myself, what are these powers which tempt me? Why should I lose my character for few metal trinkets? But I still feel guilty, and to this day I am sorry to God in my prayers. My mother and father tell each other everything, so Abba soon found out why I was so sad. I could see in his eyes that I had failed him. I wanted him to be proud of me, like he was when I was presented with the first in year trophies at school. Or that day, well, or the day our kindergarten teacher, Miss Ulfa, told him I had written only speak in Urdu on the blackboard for my classmates at the start of an Urdu lesson so we could learn the language faster, or when I came first in the Pashto essay writing competition. My father consoled me by telling me about the mistakes great heroes made when they were children. He told me that Mahatma Gandhi said freedom is not worth having if it does not include the freedom to make mistakes. At school, we had read stories about Muhammad Ali Jinnah. As a boy in Karachi, who would study by glow of street light because there was no light at home. He told other boys to stop playing marbles in the dust and to play cricket instead so their clothes and hands would get dirty. Outside his office, my father had a framed copy of a letter written by Abraham Lincoln to his son's teacher, translated into Pashto. It is very beautiful letter full of good advice. Teach him, if you can, the wonder of books, but also give him quiet time to ponder the eternal mystery of birds in the sky, bees in the sun, and the flowers on green hillside. It says, teach him it is far more honorable to fail than to cheat. I think everyone makes a mistake at least once in their life. The important thing is what you learn from it. That's why I have problems with our Pashtunwali code. We are supposed to take revenge for wrongs done to us. But where does that end? If a man in one family is killed or hurt by another man, revenge must be exacted to restore Nang. It can be taken by killing any male member of the attacker's family. Then that family in turn must take revenge, and on it goes. There's no limit. We have a saying, the passion took revenge after 20 years, and another said it was taken too soon. We are people of many sayings. One is, the stone of passion does not rust in water, which means we neither forget nor forgive. That's also why we rarely say thank you, manana, because we believe in passion will never forget a good deed and is bound to reciprocate at some time, just as he will a bad one. Kindness can only be repaid with kindness. It can be repaid with expressions like thank you and then forgotten. Many families lived in walled compounds with watchtowers so they can keep an eye out for their enemies. We knew many victims of feuds. One was Sher Zaman, a man who had been in my father's class and always got better grades than him. My grandfather and uncle used to drive my father mad, teasing me, you are not good as Sher Zaman. So much he once wished that rocks would come down the mountain and flatten him. But Sher Zaman did not go to college and ended up becoming a dispenser in the village pharmacy. His family became embroiled in a dispute with their cousins over a small plot of forest. One day, as Sher Zaman and two of his brothers were on their way to the land, they were ambushed by his uncle and some of his men. All three brothers were killed. As a respected man in the community, my father was often called on to mediate feuds. He did not believe in badal revenge and would try to make people see that neither side had anything to gain from continuing the violence and it would be better for them to get on their lives. There were two families in our village he could not convince. They had been locked in the feuds for so long no one even seemed to remember how it had started. Probably some small slight, as we are hot-headed people. First as brother on one side would attack an uncle on the other, then vice versa. It consumed their lives. Our people say it is a good system and our crime rate is much lower than in non-passion areas. But I think that if someone kills your brother, you shouldn't kill them for their brother. You should teach them instead. I'm inspired by Karl Abdul Ghaffar Khan, the man who some call Frontier Gandhi, who introduced a non-violent philosophy to our culture. It's the same with stealing. Some people like me get caught. Wow, they will never do it again. Other, oh, it's not a big deal, it was just a little thing. But the second time they will steal something bigger, and the third time something bigger still. In my country, too many politicians think nothing of stealing. They are rich and we are a poor country, yet they loot, unloot. Most of them don't pay taxes, but that's the least of it. They take out loans from state banks, but they don't pay them back. They get kickbacks on government contracts from friends or the companies they awarded them. Many of them own expensive flats in London. I don't know how they can live with their consciences when they see our people going hungry or sitting in the darkness of endless power cuts, or children unable to go to school as their parents need them to work. My father says that Pakistan has been cursed with more than its fair share of politicians who only think about money. They don't care if the army is actually flying the plane. They're happy to stay out of a cockpit and sit in business class, close the curtains, and enjoy the fine food and service while the rest of us are squashed in economy. I had been born into a sort of democracy in which for 10 years Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif kept replacing each other, none of their governments were never completing a term, and always accusing each other of corruption. But 2 years after I was born, the general took over. It happened in a manner so dramatic that it sounds like something out of a movie. Nawaz Sharif was prime minister at the time and had fallen out with his army chief, General Pervez Musharraf, and sacked him. At the time, General Musharraf was on a plane of our national airline PIA coming back from Sri Lanka. Nawaz Sharif was so worried about his reaction that he tried to stop the plane from landing in Pakistan. He ordered Karachi airport to switch off its landing lights and to park fire engines on the runway to block the plane, even though it had 200 other passengers on board and not enough fuel to get to another country. Within an hour of the announcement on television of our Musharraf sacking, tanks were on the street and the troops had taken over the newsroom and the airports. The local commander, General Iftikhar, stormed the control tower at Karachi so that Musharraf's plane could land. Musharraf then seized power, threw Sharif into a dungeon in a talk fort. Some people celebrated by handing out sweets as Sharif was unpopular, but my father cried when he heard the news. He had thought we were done with military dictatorships. Sharif was accused of treason and only saved by his friends in the Saudi royal family who arranged his exile. Musharraf was our fourth military ruler. Like all our dictators, he started by addressing the nation on TV, beginning, Mere Aziz Hamwatano, my dear countrymen, then went into long tirade against Sharif, saying under his Pakistan lost our honor, dignity, and respect. He vowed to end corruption and go after those guilty of plundering and looting the national wealth. He promised he would make his own assets and tax return public. He said he would only run the country for a short time, but no one believed him. General Zia had promised to be in power for 90 days and had stayed more than 11 years until he was killed in an air crash. It's the same old story, my father said, and he was right. Musharraf promised to end the old feudal system by which the same few dozen families control our entire country and bring fresh, young, clean faces into politics. Instead, his cabinet was made up of very same old faces. Once again, our country was expelled from the Commonwealth and became an international black sheep. The Americans had already suspended most aid the year before when we conducted nuclear tests, but now almost everyone boycotted us. With such a history, you can see why the people of Swat did not always think it was a good idea to be part of Pakistan. Every few years, Pakistan sent us a new deputy commissioner or DC to govern Swat, just as the British had done in colonial days. It seemed to us that these bureaucrats came to our province simply to get rich, then went back home. They had no interest in developing Swat. Our people are used to being subservient because until the Wali, no criticism was tolerated. If anyone offended him, the entire family could be expelled from Swat. So when the DCs came from Pakistan, they were the new kings and no one questioned them. Older people often look back nostalgically to the days of the last Wali. Back then, they said, the mountains were all still covered in trees. There were schools every 5 kilometers, and the Wali Sahib would visit them in person to resolve problems. After that happened with Safina, I vowed that I would never treat a friend badly again. My father always said it is important to treat friends well. When He was at college and had no money for food or books. Many of his friends helped him out, and he never forget that. I have three good friends, Safina from my area, Sambol from village, and Moniba from school. Moniba had become my best friend in the primary school. We lived near each other, and I persuaded her to come to our school. She's a wise girl, though we were often fall out, particularly when we go on school trips. She comes from a large family with three sisters and four brothers. I think of her as my big sister, even though I'm 6 months older than her. Moniva set down rules which I try to follow. We don't have secrets from each other, and we don't share our secrets with anyone else. She doesn't like me talking to other girls and say we must be careful of associating with people who are badly behaved or have a reputation for trouble. She always says I have four brothers, and if I do even the slightest thing wrong, they can stop me going to school. I was so eager not to disappoint my parents that I ran errands for anyone. One day, our neighbor asked me to buy some maize for them from the bazaar. On the way, a boy on a bicycle crashed into me, and my left shoulder hurt so much that my eyes watered. But I still went and bought the maize, took it to my neighbors, and then went home. Only then did I cry. Shortly after that, I found the perfect way to win back the respect of my father. Notices had gone up at school for public speaking competition, and Moniba and I both decided to enter. I remembered the story of my father surprising my grandfather and longed to do the same. When we got the topic, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was honesty is the best policy. The only practice we would have was reading out poems at morning assembly, but there was an older girl at school called Fatima who was a very good speaker. She was beautiful and spoke in an animated way. She could speak confidently in front of hundreds of people, and she would hang on her every word. Moniba and I longed to be like her and studied her carefully. In our culture, speeches are usually written by our fathers, uncles, or teachers. They tend to be in English or Urdu, not in our native Pashto. We thought speaking in English meant you were more intelligent. We were wrong, of course. It does not matter what language you chose. The important thing is the words you use to express yourself. Muniba's speech was written by one of her older brothers. She quoted beautiful poems by Allama Iqbal, our national poet. My father wrote my speech. In it, he argued that if you want to be good, but do it in bad ways, that's still bad. In the same way, if you choose a good method to do something bad, it's still bad. He ended it with Lincoln's words: it is far more honorable to fail than to cheat. On the day, only 8 or 9 boys and girls turned up. Moniba spoke well. She was very composed, and her speech was more emotional and poetic than mine, though mine might have had the better message. I was so nervous before the speech. I was trembling with fear. My grandfather had come to watch, and I knew he really wanted me to win the competition, which made me even more nervous. I remembered what my father had said about taking a deep breath before starting. But then I saw that all eyes were on me, and I rushed through. I kept losing my place as the pages danced in my shaking hands. But I ended with Lincoln words. I looked up at my father. He was smiling. When the judges announced the result at the end, Moniba had won. I came second. It didn't matter. Lincoln also wrote in the letter to his son's teachers, teach him how to gracefully lose. I was used to coming top of my class, but I realized that even if you win 3 or 4 times, the next victory will not necessarily be yours without trying, and also that sometimes it's better to tell your own story. I started writing my own speeches and changing the way I delivered them from my heart rather than from a sheet of paper.